Hello and welcome, everybody. This is the first episode of Sit Down with Shibby in 2024. It's been a while. There wasn't really much to talk about, right? I think now that we have a really spicy topic to talk about, I'm joined by RMC, aka RandomMinionCaster. He's the resident, in my opinion, CBLOL expert, one of the guys that was on the unofficial CBLOL English broadcast that then became the official CBLOL English broadcast. He was recently featured on Summoning Insight as well with Monte Cristo and Thorin as the CBLOL regional expert. So I think I got the right guy to talk about the Americas merger here. And RMC, the quick and dirty about it, obviously, for anybody that doesn't know or has been living under a rock, is that both the CBLOL region, the LLA region, and the North American LCS region is going to be combined into two different conferences. It'll be the North and South conferences. Each will consist of 6 teams. The North Conference will consist of 6 North American LCS teams, 1 LLA team, and 1 guest spot, as well as the South Conference will just be 6 CBLOL teams, 1 LLA team, and 1 guest spot here. So CBLOL is losing 4 teams, and the LCS is losing another 2 teams because there'll be 6 LCS teams instead of 8. And the reason for that as well is they're also introducing a new international tournament. There's going to be 3 splits globally across all the regions. The first international tournament will be the old MSI format where 1 team from each region will go and compete. There'll also be an MSI, the same MSI tournament that we always see, 2 teams from each region. And then obviously the world spot, 3 teams from each region. I think the big thing to understand is that Riot is homogenizing and consolidating all of these minor regions and everything like that into 5 major regions, 3 of which already exist: the LPL, the LCK, and the EMEA region, as well as in 2025, we'll have the Americas region, which is what I just talked about, and the region that's happening is APAC. And the stuff that's happening over there, I'll probably get into in another video. I'll probably talk to Initializer or Nymera or someone that's like, the expert around there, because one could argue what's happening over there is much worse or better, depending on your outlook, but it is a lot of pain right now. Did I do it is that the quick and dirty of what's happening to the Americas? There's obviously a lot of nuance coming in. There's more stuff, but that's kind of the major overview changes, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's a global thing that is having different regional impacts. So different regions, of course, have their own different views. It just happens that CBLOL in Brazil, I think, being a passionate fan base right now, is overwhelmingly loud on social media. So yeah.
Yeah, and I want to kind of get into all the different, because there's been a bunch of videos, articles, stuff like that. And I think a lot of people look towards the North American podcast, LCS podcast, The Dive, where Mark Z was featured on there. And they talked about a lot of the changes. One of which being that this wasn't actually like a competitive based change, right? I think a lot of CBLOL fans kind of misunderstood that a little bit, where at least a lot of the noise that I saw on Twitter and a lot of the stuff, it's like, oh, we have to save a region. We have to do this. We, like North America isn't competitive. Like, who cares about competitive? But this push was actually backed from a business decision, right? And the main thing was, assuming we take everything for Mark Z at face value, right? We can't like be weird and like tinfoil hat theory, but the idea is that they're swapping over to what they call a global revenue pool, and that is actually going to be funded by a majority of digital assets, right? So digital asset monetization to things like the world skin, the faker skin, the icons that they promised, I believe, the team skins that they promised, all that kind of stuff. The global revenue pool will fund all 5 major regions and all the teams participating in those 5 major regions. And so the idea was that when it was all scattered, when they had like 12 plus regions, it was minor regions plus major regions, there's 100 plus teams, stuff like that. The global revenue pool was being split up into too many chunks. And so what they decided is that they're going to consolidate. They're going to have 5 major regions, and those teams participating in those regions will have some sort of, I'm going to call it a stipend, because that's really what it is. The global revenue pool as a stipend and as a way to fund those teams. And so I want to ask you, RMC, when looking at the CBLOL community and the noise, do they actually like understand the fact that this is like a more monetary business move, or is it kind of more focused on the fact that like, hey, we are losing our region, like we are losing 40% of our teams, like a lot of jobs are gone? Like, what is the general consensus around the business aspect? Because I know that for CBLOL as a region as well, a lot of the teams or majority of the teams aren't very profitable, right? I believe the Los Grandes CEO came out and said that the reason they were only profitable this year was because they were able to sell Natuno as a player, right? So like that already indicates to me that them participating in CBLOL wasn't enough, even with all the fan bases and the activations, the sponsorships, so on and so forth. It kind of feels like they are having the same problem as LCS. It's just they just have a bigger fan base, but the activation and monetization isn't enough.
So, okay, monologue time, because there's a lot of context that kind of needs to go into this. So the first half of your question should be about, does CBLOL understand this, about why this had happened? Kind of yes, kind of no. So on the one hand, the competitive issue was never the issue for CBLOL. CBLOL didn't care about, the spots about competitive. They didn't care about or they understood that this decision wasn't about their performance on the international stage. Because if that was the case, CBLOL is going to lose their seed. We've never gone out of play-ins. And in fact, arguably the last two international events have been some of our worst in recent splits. I mean, we didn't even come close. Loud kind of crapped the bed a little bit. So Brazil as a region, I was not really concerned about the competitive aspect of it. I think the big problem was that they got lost in the sauce when it came to the monetary and business side of things. Because from a regional perspective, Brazil was the second fastest growing region after the LPL. And this was, I think, last year, the year ago, that stat came out. Brazil was viewership is up, right? They expanded. They tried to do the official English broadcast. And I've been told that when we switched to co-streams, it wasn't a financial decision. It wasn't because, hey, the English broadcast is losing money. We don't have money for it. Switch to co-streams. They did that for other like co-streaming reasons. They're trying to promote co-streams. So as far as Brazil is concerned, it's not a monetary issue in their region specifically. They are growing. So it's a monetary issue. Why are they being affected when they are actually working out and being profitable? Now, that's the broadcast. That's the product of CBLOL, right? Then we go to the teams. Like you're talking about Los Grandes, Cacavel, the CEO kind of mentioned that, yeah, we're only profitable because we sold Natuno. Now, rumors are Natuno's buyout was somewhere between 50K and 100K reais. Of course, that's a rumor. Exact numbers are not. But realistically, that's not a huge amount. I think reais to USD right now, one USD is about 5 point something, 5.3 reais. Yeah. So if it's 50 to 100, it's like 10K to 20K. It's not a huge dollar value that's a deficit. And what you have to keep in mind about most teams and most sports in general is that sports, it tends to be a losing business, right? Like if you look at football or soccer in North America, most of the teams make losses, right? Like the team itself isn't profitable. A lot of times it's what the brands are doing, the advertisement, a lot of the other things that come with it. To put this in context, SKT, or sorry, not SKT, T1 in Korea, they are the number one team in the world, right? Like they are one of the biggest brands. They posted in 2023 a 12 billion won loss, which works out to about 8.7 million US dollars. And that's a successful team. And after winning 2023, their operating costs went up by 15%. So, and they're still doing it, right? Like T1 has no signs of slowing down whatsoever. So the problem is, to a lot of Brazilians, when they look at it from a monetary point of view, they don't understand why Brazil has to take a hit when all of this stuff is happening, right? Like they're fine in their region. Sure, some of the teams are taking losses, but the teams kind of don't care, right? Like a lot of the teams there, if we're taking losses, we cut costs. This split alone, we've seen multiple teams, I think like 4 teams, switch to a more rookie-based system to lower their salary costs. And it's been working out. The rookies are actually popping off and doing really, really, really well. The academy system, the tier 2 system in CBLOL, went from 10 teams last year, 12 teams in split 1 or the spring split, and now they're up to 14 teams in split 2 or the summer split. So they're expanding, and there are teams foaming at the mouth wanting to get into CBLOL, despite some of the teams on there already posting losses. So as far as the Brazil mentality is concerned, it's like, why are we? There's just no upside to them. They don't understand why we're dying. If there's a financial decision, we're doing fine. If it's a competitive decision, we're being more competitive than ever, right? Like they're just struggling to understand why they're getting hit at all.
I think it's interesting to talk about kind of the tier 2 scene, because CBLOL was another region that had franchising spots, right? It wasn't actually as expensive as LCS, but I think what it turned out to be, I think it was 800,000 per franchising spot was what it was. I think it was reported in 2021 or 2020. And a lot of the teams that ended up, going in, like there is a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of turnover, but there definitely is some turnover when it comes to teams coming into CBLOL and flipping out. Same thing with LCS, right? Like Netshoes Miners, Flamengo, Cruzeiro Esports, Vorax Liberty, Vivo Keyed for an extended period of time before they came back as Vivo Keyed Stars. Like the turnover for CBLOL teams is almost eerily similar to LCS teams, right? Where you had, organizations like Clutch Gaming selling off the Dignitas. You had, Complexity, all these different like teams leaving, and Complexity was pre-franchising, but even post-franchising, right? You've had teams leave, Echo Fox, Golden Guardians, Evil Geniuses, so on and so forth. I mean, it's almost crazy how similar CBLOL and LCS is when it comes to retaining teams and retaining these spots, and businesses and esports teams not able to make anything profitable for these spots. So, I mean, when the similarities are drawn there, like overall, I would think this changes better consolidation wise. But like you mentioned, the CBLOL fans, they kind of just view it as we're losing 4 teams for the sake of NA.
Well, I think it's a little bit different because there's a reason why, like LCS has lost teams, right? We went from 10 teams, we're now down to 8 teams. There's talk about some of these 8 teams even wanting to leave, despite sort of shrinking down and getting a larger chunk of the revenue pool. CBLOL has had teams swap out, but generally speaking, there's always somebody ready to step back in. And so there's a lot more, I feel like, demand, and the viewer base, the passion of the region is bigger in terms of the org side of things, which is why it's kind of different. The other thing too is like for the LCS, I'm just thinking right now, like of all the teams we've got in the LCS, 100 Thieves, Cloud9, Dig, FlyQuest, Immortals, NRG, Shopify. I'm missing one.
That's it. You got 8. I think you got all 8, right?
I got 7. I'm missing one. Liquid. Sorry. Team Liquid. Yeah. Like how many of them already jobs? How many of them were actually there at the beginning? Right? How many of them have a long history? I feel like the longest is probably Dignitas and C9 at this point, because Liquid only came in season 4, season 5, like after Curse.
Yeah, well, it's also weird to say Dignitas has history because they were gone for a very long time and they came back. So, like, you could argue Cloud9 is probably one of the few teams that have been there for almost the entirety of the LCS, right? Almost. Team Liquid, if you count the curse days, then yeah, they've been there, but like they swapped in, like you said. Yeah, it's really tough to be there from the beginning, I guess. I mean, even since the beginning of franchising, right? Like you had Cloud9, Team Liquid, Golden Guardians at one point, and then they left. TSM at one point, and now they're gone, right? One of the, TSM, like I would akin TSM to like Loud in terms of the fan base, right? Like how much fans they had, how like they were the biggest organization in North America for a very long time prior to Team Liquid's dominance, and they folded over in theory.
Yeah, and when I look at CBLOL, it's kind of different because you look at the orgs that were there at the beginning, right? Like Pain literally was there from the very inception, pretty much, of CBLOL, and they've always been there. They've never left. Like, sure, they got knocked down to tier 2 because Brazil had promo relegations up to 2020, and then they switched to franchise system in 2021. But prior to that, I mean, Pain's always been around and one of the top 2 tiers. INTZ, a team that some people might remember from having gone to Worlds. They're the most successful org. They've been around forever. Anytime Pain and INTZ plays, it's it's like one of the like El Clasico. It's the classic matchup between those 2 teams. K-Stars that you mentioned, Shibby, they were missing for a little bit, not by choice. They didn't make the franchising cut in 2021, but K-Stars always wanted back in. And so as soon as a spot came up, as soon as they said like, okay, there's somebody here, we negotiate, we try and get in, they got in immediately as soon as they could. Kaboom, 2014, like they've been around pretty much since the beginning as well. They're there, right? So with Brazil, there is a lot of history with these teams, with the orgs, and with the players. Heck, some people might remember BRTT from the Double Lift. The BRTT veteran Double Lift means way in the past. That guy's been around forever. He just came back this split. He like pulled an anti TSM or anti LCS where old players are coming back to play in CBLOL because of history. Shinny came in as well, another player who's won on INTZ, who has the most championships. That guy's been really, really good. He's back in playing, winning right now on that Fluxu squad. So because of that, Brazil, their history, I don't want to say it's richer than the LCS because the LCS has a longer history, but at least right now, there is more passion from even the old days. CBLOL has retained, I think, its viewership a lot better than the LCS has, and so they care a lot. There's no team in the CBLOL right now, even the new teams, which doesn't have a decent fan base, people who care, and who's just kind of slacking off right now. Every team is still making an effort, and that is part of why it's so hard to say just, hey, cut 40% of your teams. Who do you cut, right?
Yeah, like, but I think that's also maybe pushed by the fact that there are probably some CBLOL teams that want to get out to some extent, right? I know there were rumors of certain teams that, I mean, that's more of the speculative cause, and we won't go super into that. But I do want to
Sure.
maybe talk about that little point that you brought up as like CBLOL was able to retain their viewership. I think what they've done
Mhm.
also really well, and I think that kind of North America has failed at, I think something this is Korea has done really well, is their ability to both retain their boomer fan base, let's call it, me and you, right? Like we were there, we were around, like I'm 29 or 28, I'm turning 29 next year. Like, we're the older fan base, but
Yep.
CBLOL has also been able to garner new fans as well, younger fans specifically, as
Yes.
well as LCK, which has been very interesting. And can you kind of, what, like, if you could comment, like what is the reason for that? Like, because LCS has been unable to really do it. LEC to some extent has kind of been unable to do it. Like, there are still a lot of old head fans we'll talk about, but there are also new players coming in with like EMEA being in flux, right? A lot of younger generations. You have more people to play for. But I feel like LCS has really catastrophically failed on that front, partially due to the play versus controversy that happened a long time ago, partially due to the fact that, like, in North America, there are just more games coming out, right? Console gaming being very big,
Yep.
Valorant, CSGO, like all this stuff, right? There's a bunch of other games to compete against. And so League hasn't really been able to, at least League Esports hasn't really able to grasp the younger audience. Whereas it feels like CBLOL, like, you can't, it's not just 400,000 29-year-olds or like 200,000, like, it's 21 to 29. What have they done? Because I know Brazil also has like CSGO and Valorant. And they're very good
Yeah.
at those games.
Yeah. I'd argue that first-person shooters, Brazil's better at first-person shooters than they are at
Oh,
MOBAs, and
yeah.
that's the amazing part is despite the lack of international competitive success in MOBAs for Brazil, League still somehow absolutely thrives in the region. People still love it. Now, I think it's multifaceted in terms of why that's the case. Part of it is that CBLOL is truly by the fans for the fans, right? Like CBLOL isn't always they're not. It's not Riot trying to tell the fans, "Hey, tune in to us for all these reasons." It's literally like the fans make half the broadcast in a way. If you're familiar with the CBLOL scene, for example, recently there's like a roundtable on was it My Esports or Ilhadis Lendes? So in the first place, the biggest stream, by the way, for CBLOL isn't even the Riot stream. It's Bayano's stream, Ilhadis
Yes.
Lendes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like Bayano is absolutely huge, former pro player. Like there's a lot of former pros and a lot of like personalities in Brazil that care about League of Legends and always have, and they promote a lot of this. So one of the things that IDL loves to do is every week they'll like rank the players and they'll have these player cards which look great. And like having all this peripheral content to the actual broadcast, I think helps a lot in terms of retaining people and building up the storylines. The players themselves, imagine APA, except every player's like APA. All of them trash talk. That's CBLOL for you. Literally, they
Yeah.
get up in the middle of the match and start yelling at each other. If you go and watch just this last weekend, Pain versus oh my goodness, they played against Red. Their AD carry Titan was formerly like the heart and soul of Red Canids. Mid game, he stands up, he starts yelling on the other side, and the cameras show that, right? That's what people are kind of love as well. So the players are more free to express themselves. It almost reminds me of the old Bay Life days, of TSM back in the LCS, except even more so. It's like a drama every week. The fans themselves as well are also huge. The orgs interact a lot with the fans. So I was going to say that there was a recent roundtable thing, either on IDL or My Esports. I forget who arranged it, but two of the guests invited. One of was INTZ fan, the other is like a Pain fan. Like these guys are just fans, by the way. They're not actually affiliated with the organizations. The Pain fans meet us, but he had a running joke during the off season last year, like 2023, 2024 offseason, that he was the one calling the shots because he was on Twitter saying, okay, hire this guy. He reached out to Coach CL going like, hey, I heard you're going to K-Stars, come to Pain. Like the fans themselves are kind of reaching out, and the orgs are willing to interact with them and say, okay, fans, who do you think is really, really good? You know what? Sure, we'll reach out to that player. We'll bring them in because you'll want that player, right? The fan interaction is really, really strong. And there's also generational love for League in Brazil. This is something that I don't see in the LCS. Like, how many of us, like boomers, getting our age, like some of us around our age are having kids and whatnot. Who's bringing them to the LCS arena, right? And say, like, hey, grow up here. If you watch CBLOL, there are actually babies in the crowd sometimes, literally. Like some of the players' kids go and watch their parents there. Like Titan has a kid and he
Oh
goes to
yeah.
watch the games. Yeah, he's so cute, by the way. But like, some of the other like, that's not an uncommon thing. So it's like a family thing almost. Out of the rookies that came in this year so far, on INTZ, there's a guy called Yups. He's the younger brother of another player on that team, Yampi, who kind of got into esports partially because his brother was doing it. There's another player on Los Grandes called Super Clever. He's a very young rookie as well, who came in. I think he's like 19 or 20. He got into League because of his dad, who was playing League and he wanted to do something with his dad. And so they kind of played League and he had a knack for it. And next thing you know, he's kind of going pro. So now with Brazil, there's generational stuff as well. Their talent pipeline is actually working. For one, they didn't have franchising till 2021. So that meant that you could actually play through their challenger circuit, the BRCC in the past, and promote by beating those guys, right? So because of that, there was more of a dream coming through. 2021, 2022 with franchising, there was a meme about how Brazilian Academy was like the garage where like old cars go to retire sort of thing, and it was just old players. But 2023, 2024 rolls around, and they're actively looking for new players, looking for young talent to bring up and promote. Like they actually use franchising system, right, Shibby? They actually develop talent. I was crying with joy, and that's why I cover Academy. And now with the expansion of Academy and CBLOL as well, they go to 12 teams, 14 teams. Those 4 extra teams have to come through an insane qualifier. They do like 2, I think it's single elim, or yeah, I think it's single elim tournaments, like 128 teams, 2 tournaments, and then they rank by points. The 2 highest teams by points will qualify into Academy. So even then, even the tier 2, they try to introduce relegation promotions as fast as they can, and that just helps introduce new blood, introduce new players, make sure that the competitive dream remains alive, and that will attract new people as well.
It sounds like, CBLOL, at least domestically, is very robust, right? They've got a very,
Yes.
very solid tier 2 system, like you mentioned. They're expanding it when most teams are contracting or leaving LCS and ACL. Sounds like, players that come in, like you said, there's generational kind of love for the game. And also the teams do a pretty good aspect, not just in the fan interaction, but also getting people interested. Like, hey, we're loud. You come from our Valorant sector. Watch our league team. Like, why aren't you watching our league team? Why aren't you supporting loud holistically, right? Or why aren't you supporting Pain Gaming or Vivo Keyed, right? Because I know those guys, like you said, arguably are better in the FPS. And I know there's a lot of crossover. Like you mentioned, the co-streaming with Bayano and stuff like that. I mean, even LCS has gotten him as a co-streamer, which has pumped the numbers up a little bit. That's all fine, right? Like domestically, they're very successful. But I want to kind of talk about another, I would think in my mind, at least from like someone that is like very competitive mind focused, that is somebody that is like, I want to see the best games. I want to see all the players be really good. I do want to talk about like the fact that ultimately CBLOL just isn't competitive internationally, right? Like, does that aspect not matter to the orgs, the fans, the players? Like, it can't be good to see your team go up to international tournaments and quite literally get slapped, get handed, right? Like, you aren't very competitive. It's very difficult. Yeah, you've got those moments where like loud 80 carry player, he's flexing the bicep, bot gap, right? Seos and Branch, all these, you got all these players, right? You also have like the Tinones, you've got the Kaboom, like you've got moments here and there. Is it, I'll phrase it this way. This will be the first part of this kind of discussion. Is it not important for CBLOL fans and teams and players to be competitively international? Because you guys, I'll say you guys, because I don't want you to like obviously speak for all of CBLOL, but like you guys are like maybe the 7th, 8th best region at times.
That's right. Like I said, our recent international showings have not been great. It's been some of the worst we've had actually in the last couple of years. Now, I know on social media, a lot of Brazilians are saying like, oh, we don't care about international. I want to put this in context. It's not that Brazil doesn't care about international or doesn't care about success. It's priorities. Brazil cares first and foremost about their domestic league and the teams, the stories, the narratives, the players. domestically. That is the most important thing to them. But they do care about international success. Every time we go international, there's a reason why, right? On the broadcast, we'll always show, like the Brazilians celebrating whenever Lao does well in recent splits. Like I was there in Korea when they were filming, when the train started happening, when Brewster, part of Bayano's crew, was there with the crew and they started dancing when, they kind of won against, I think it was Gab at the time. Yeah, no, Brazil does care, but they are not obsessed with success. They are very actually realistic people. So if they had a shot at international success, they go, wow, look at the Valorant scene, right? The Brazilian teams go absolutely nuts. When they lose, they flip out, they'll leave the arena. They wear their emotions on their sleeves. But in League of Legends, we know, we're a minor region, we know that the goal is to get out of play-ins. We talk to most Brazilians, we're not talking, oh, we're going to win worlds. We're talking, the goal is get out of play-ins for the first time ever. Because they're realistic. But they also don't want they don't want freebies. They don't want handouts, right? Like if they could get to worlds, if they could win worlds because every team against them just suddenly fell sick and forfeited, that's not going to make them happy. You know what I mean? Like they want to know they were good enough. They want to beat you and look you dead in the eye and yell at you from across the screen or from across the stage because they were better. They beat you. So because of that, in a way, Brazil wants success, but they're not obsessed with it. They're willing to say, okay, you know what? We know we're not good enough. We will get there. We will improve. That brings us joy. But right in the current, at this very moment with the merger, that's not priority for us.
And I guess, obviously, this is kind of like a byproduct of the merger, that like there will be more cross-conference play and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
My criticism to this is that realistically, the cross-conference play, it's only going to happen in playoffs. It's not like it's regular season cross-conference play. And so what I hearken it to is what has been happening in the APAC region. I'm going to call it the APAC region now because it's what it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Is that you've got teams like OSHE, you've got the LJL, you've got all these teams fighting against each other, but OSHE just goes and then gets smacked. Like, that's what happens. Yep. The LJL teams are super far ahead, or the PCS teams are very far ahead. It almost feels like, similarly, this is what's going to happen for a while to the CBLOL teams, because granted, there are going to be 3 splits, so there'll be 3 instances of internet or a cross-conference play, right? Essentially, right? There'll be the top 4 teams, however they're going to do it. I'm going to speculate. It's probably going to be like top 4 from LCS, top 4 from CBLOL, or top 6, whatever. They're going to do like a 12-team bracket with a lower and upper. The idea is that 3 times a year, they are only going to get to play North America. And it might just be for like a week or 2, right? It might not be that long. Now, arguably, the top teams will get seeded against the bottom teams and stuff like that. You'll have weeks to boot camp, play on the North American server, stuff like that. Do you actually think this cross-conference play is going to help CBLOL? I mean, on a long enough timeline, sure, right? 10, 15 years. But I almost feel like it's akin to when OSHE goes to the APAC region and they just lose to LJL and PCS. I like, that's my feeling, at least, around it.
And you know what? That's right. I think most Brazilians are fully expecting to lose early against North America, and it's a game of catch up, right? I don't think Brazil. I think Brazil's fine with that, right? If we were just gonna say, "Oh, we'll play North America," it's like, okay, great. There's no downside to this necessarily, right? Like we're not losing anything from this, so yeah, sure, we'd go for it. We'll treat it like a boot camp. That part I think is fine. I don't think Brazil has any problem with that part. It's the cost for this minuscule, I'm going to call it a minuscule benefit from the eyes of the Brazilians, because like I said, it's sure it's a benefit, but it's not one they particularly feel strongly about. But the cost is what makes them scream for this, because if the cost to scrim against North America, or to get these sort of play matches against North America, is to lose 40% of their teams, then no. 100% they're not going to say it's worth it.
And there's, I think, another aspect of this, I think, that we didn't really touch upon, is kind of the consolidation of talent. Because I don't think it's wrong to say that there are some bad teams in CBLOL. There's always going to be a 10th place team. There's always going to be a first place team. That's just kind of how the competitive nature of sports and the leagues work, right? And so when looking at it from a consolidation of talent point, going from 10 to 6, I mean, realistically, there are going to be fans that are definitely going to be sad they're losing teams, but like, is there going to be fans that are like sad about losing? I'm going to take like the bottom teams, like Liberty, Fluxo, these kind of teams, right? Like, I know there are fan bases for it, and it's wild for me to say that. Like, I know there's going to be fans that are going to be sad about losing Furia. Furia is like a household name to some aspect for CBLOL and Brazil as a whole. Is there a side on the CBLOL side where like, oh, the consolidation of talent, us going down to 6 teams, it's going to make the top 6 teams so competitive now? Like, is there any sort of like, I guess, positive sentiment towards that? Because from my aspect, I think it did really well for North American LCS. I think LCS has looked the most fun and competitive it has in a very long time after we went down from 10 to 8 teams. Arguably, some talent came in, that new Dig roster with Licorice and Sven and all that stuff. You can already see the stuff that's happening. Immortals, I mean, even Shopify Rebellions to an extent, they're exciting to watch. You don't know what they're going to do. Is there any sentiment towards that for CBLOL, or is it like we just want our 10 teams? Like, we don't care if Liberty's 10th or 1st. Like, I want them in our league.
Definitely more of the latter. I think there's 2 parts to that question. The first is, in the first place, there's no team. I said this earlier as well, and I'll go into it now. It's like there's no team here where people will be happy to see them drop. Like, we talk about, say, 10th place teams, right? Like you mentioned Fluxu, because last split they absolutely struggled, but they made changes. They brought back Shinny, an old name, who's been doing really well, or who is very big in the scene and has come in and done very well for the team. Fluxu is currently, as of day of this recording, this was after week 3, they are 6-0. They have not dropped a single game from just 2 minor changes in the AD carry and the jungle position. So, like, if you say like, oh, okay, let's drop Fluxu, well, now they've got Shinny, they've got a lot of supporters, they are top of the table. If we talk about Liberty, for example, they are currently 0-6. They have not won a single game. But Brazilian fans, CBLOL fans would scream, because Liberty is where they are right now because of 2 things. One, they are betting on a rookie roster, which has primarily rookies from this year, with like 1 super vet in Macau, who is one of our older AD carries in the region. And this split specifically, Coach Turtle, by the way, from EG, and Coach Belzy, formerly of Loud, part of the 3-time winning, he was the coach who led them to the first 3-peat in Brazil history. They're both on this Liberty roster, and they made the call. We are not going to scrim other teams this split. We are going to practice internally, football style or soccer style for NA. That's why Liberty is 0-6 right now. So if you want to ask them, people are going to scream, because they are trying to make magic happen. They are trying to push the boundaries, and they are bringing in rookies. And last split, they had a 7 straight win streak with this rookie roster. The magic is there. So if you name a team, Shibby, I can tell you a story about the team and why the CBLOL fans don't want them gone. Current stories, like existing narratives for these teams. Every team is precious. And if anything, fans have actually wanted CBLOL to expand the main league to 12 teams following the academy expansion. So because of that, there will always be a lot of upset fans. And some of these fans might not even be fans of the team itself. They might just be fans of CBLOL and what the team is doing for CBLOL as a whole. Now, in regards to like consolidating talent, CBLOL is oversaturated with talent. That's a huge problem. The fact that Shinny and BRTT came back and Shinny is popping off right now, BRTT honestly not doing bad individually. Like his team, Los Grandes, has not won a game, but it's not because of his individual mechanics. He came back and he actually reached the level of the pros fairly quickly. He practiced a lot in the offseason. He knew he was coming back. He did the conditioning he needed to do. So when you look at old players coming back, you look at new players promoting up. Dioge and Yups coming up this split from Academy. They're actually on loan to INTZ. They started 4-0 for the season. They're now 4-2. But they started without dropping a single game. There's talent coming up. There's old talent that can come in. You can see how rich CBLOL is in terms of their average level of talent, that all these guys can come in. And because of that, consolidating doesn't really help them. And every super team that has been tried in CBLOL, much like most super teams the world over, tends to fail. It's not about just the talent. There's a lot of kind of finding the right recipe to mix all of these ingredients, all these players together. And for that, the more players available, the better. The more teams to try out different configurations, the better.
We've gone over a lot of kind of, maybe the holistic changes regarding, what's happening with the scene, where the CBLOL kind of scene views it. And, you've been a really good help in figuring all that out and unraveling and unwrapping that. But I do want to kind of just hear your opinion, RMC, on kind of like what is the overall sentiment, like, or I guess like not overall sentiment, but what is your sentiment regarding kind of what's happening, right? Like, is there some understanding that over a long enough timeline, consolidating to 5 regions, swapping over to the global revenue pool where digital asset monetization is going to be the way that these teams are funded from Riot, right? It's going to be way more funding because fans are always going to buy skins, right? Like it doesn't matter. Sponsors, I'm not going to eat. I'm going to be real. I have not ever eaten Pagoda. I probably will never eat Pagoda. I don't like egg rolls. This is who I am, unfortunately. I'm never going to buy a Kia because I saw Kia on LCS and stuff like that. So like sponsors and ad revenue and all that kind of stuff, activations isn't really relevant to me. But like, I know a lot of people that'll buy skins. People are buying the $500 Ari skin. Like that's an esports related skin. I'm sure people are going to buy the Vayne Uzi skin that will inevitably come out, right? All that kind of stuff. Maybe they make a BRTT skin. I mean, if they make like a Brazilian skin,
I'd buy that.
Right? Like
BRTT Raven skin, let's go.
There is a market there, or a Tinon skin, whatever. Out of his 10,000 champions he plays, you know, like there is an idea. I can see kind of the global aspect of it, where like, regardless of Hall of Legends, you have the opportunity now to be like, hey, in Brazil, we are gonna sell a Draven BRTT skin. In America, we're gonna sell a double lift Vayne skin or whatever, right? Like a Bjergsen this skin or a Jensen this skin and stuff like that. Like there is the ability to go region by region to activate a lot of these digital sales. Overall, I would argue that's probably a better monetary aspect, and like that's how we can keep this ecosystem afloat, because I think anybody knows that the league ecosystem and the esports ecosystem, we're in like an esports winter, right? Well, that's what it is. That's what's been touted. And it looks like it's a long winter. It's not a short one. It might be an ice age. So to combat that, is that like, can you see the beneficial aspect of that? Like, what is your kind of opinion on not just what's happening to CBLOL, but like, you know, is the Americas merger actually good overall?
Okay, so I guess you're asking my personal opinion, right? Not like Okay, so I understand why we have to do this, right? Like it is a global issue, and teams, of course, want to make money and all that. Up here in my head, I know why we're doing this, and it's the right call, right? We need it to shrink things down, not just for the LCS, by the way. And I actually want to get into this later as an aside, but like the whole CBLOL going after the LCS thing is just wrong. But it's not just the LCS. Like even the LEC will eventually need help. I mean, T1 posting those numbers tells you that even the LCK, the most successful league, arguably, could use this help. You know, so my head knows that.
And there was a petition that just came out, right, with the LCK. It was like, what, 6 months ago? 9 out of the 10 LCK teams was like, hey, Riot Games, you promised this, you promised that. Yep. What the fuck? Like, pretty much that was the idea. I think only like T1 sat out or something like that. And that's wild, right? Gen G was on that letter, arguably the more successful team in recent history. If you count like domestic success and stuff like that. I mean, those two teams, if they're struggling, right? Arnold posts all the time, like, hey, like it's tough. Like, it's not easy. Like, we're losing money, man. Like, it's fucking sucks.
100%.
Not to cut you off, but like, yeah, they're like, even the best regions are succeeding. And, you know, when you talk about the consolidation, go on. Like, why is this needed?
Well, okay, so I know a lot of teams are saying that they were promised skins and stuff, and they just need more revenue share, right? Like the cost of operating all this is going out of hand. And sure, you can blame salary caps. I think that is the easiest thing to blame. It's the most visible issue. But like it or not, this is our reality. Yeah, right? If you want league to continue the way it has been, money needs to come from somewhere. Even if you try and cut salaries at this point, right? You still need a lot to operate. So again, my head understands all of this. It's a global issue, and it affects literally every single region. The problem is, as somebody who loves CBLOL and is entrenched in that region, the heart doesn't agree with that. Because I remember like when we heard about like, oh, esports winter and CBLOL English, you know, at the time we were hitting our numbers, you know, we were hitting our targets. They were pretty happy. We were exceeding expectations and all that. And we had a little joke going inside. We had this, it was a meme, a picture of like a beautiful Brazilian beach and welcome to esports winter on it. Like that was the kind of mindset Brazil had, which was like, hey, everybody else might be freezing, but come to balmy Brazil. It's all beautiful beaches here right now. Like the weather's great. The water's warm, you know, and that's why the heart kind of like struggles with that, because CBLOL seems to be that model that worked. When every other region was struggling, when every other region is losing money, sure, the CBLOL teams were losing money, but they were still able to handle their finances. They still had time that they could still do stuff with. They weren't in panic mode when everybody else was. So because of that, like the immediate news really sucks to hear. And even now, I still wish there was a way we could have just separated Brazil from everybody else, let them have their own regional ecosystem, because they were the ones who made the regional revenue pool work and didn't need a global revenue pool. So yeah, like again, I understand where it's coming from. I just wish that Brazil could have had the exception, as it were.
Are there any CBLOL like figureheads, personalities that like support this? It almost feels like if you do, you're condemning yourself, like you become the pariah, right? It almost feels like for CBLOL personalities, you know, if whether it's org owners, players, whatever, right? If you're for this change, like it almost feels like you're done. Like the fan base will never let you back in. Is there anybody that's trying to like quell the flames in some sort of regard? Like I know LS and a couple different personalities went back and forth. I know Inero went back and forth. Like there's a lot, and then the thing comes from that, like CBLOL individuals are like, foreigners know nothing about our region. Go fuck yourself. Like that's been the general sentiment. But there is, if you look into like a lot of the other aspects, if you kind of dig through the weeds and you look at some of the critical comments, it does kind of feel that like other people are telling CBLOL what they need when CBLOL has been able to find, like you said, success. And so is there any kind of personality within the Brazilian scene? And is there anyone that's kind of saying like, hey, this change is actually good for us relative to what's happening now?
So I think a big part of the problem too is, as of right now, they don't know which 4 teams are going to get cut. And as we mentioned before, because the orgs and teams all have their own fan bases, because it's not that big a gap in terms of their viewership.
Yeah, I think there was a graphic came out, right? Like
yeah,
it was
exactly.
Like Loud is up there, Pain is up there, but like even like the bottom teams, they still are like 100,000+. You know, like there is some sort of fan base there, like very, very significant fan bases. There's no like, I'm gonna say Immortals or Dignitas right now, right? There's no
the gap's not big between top and bottom in Brazil, right? Like, and just to put this in context, for example, like Kaboom actually is one of the smaller fan bases in Brazil. Their numbers are actually on the lower side, but internationally, when you think CBLOL, everybody thinks Kaboom because they Kaboom. You know, this is for Kaboom. So because of that, a lot of these CEOs, a lot of the GMs, you know, they don't know if they're safe or not. Arguably, I think the only 2 safe teams, and even this is speculation, but I think most people generally agree, the only 2 safe teams are Loud and Pain.
Yeah, that's
everybody else could potentially be on the chopping block. And that blows my mind when you think of teams like Cade Stars, who brought in Coach CL for a 5-year program. Cade Stars as an org has been around forever, but they're scared because they didn't make franchising the first time, right? Riot decided, hey, whatever your pros were, it didn't outweigh the cons. We had better orgs. You know, INTZ, the most successful team in the region, like others have tried, but only INTZ has 5. That's their chant, right? Like, Loud's catching up though. Loud's at 4. But INTZ, they don't feel safe either because they've not won since franchising. They've not even looked good. They were the worst team last split, and they are now playing with 2 rookies on loan and finding success, right? There's insecurity there. So I think because of that, the only 2 orgs which probably right now feel like, okay, we directly benefit would probably be Pain and Loud. And Pain's background, their owner is a very wealthy individual. I've heard people joke like he's like the Tiger King of Brazil because apparently he actually owns tigers. Like, apparently, I'm a huge fan of Pain. I did not realize like this guy was that rich. And Loud is they're a huge org. Multiple esports are doing great in Valorant and Free Fire and stuff like that.
They're kind of like Team Liquid, where they just win. They just fucking win like so much.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy.
They're pretty guaranteed. Like we're not asking the 4-time rating champ. When their organization is still in the process of growing. So they're the only 2 safe ones. Because of that, I think a lot of people aren't saying anything. And the other thing to keep in mind too is most of the org owners did not find out till the night before the announcement dropped. So it's been less than a week since they found out that this was going to happen and 4 teams would get axed. So because of that, I think a lot of them are still processing it. Like, yes, they understand that whoever survives the cut is going to get more revenue share, but whether or not they'll survive is something still probably under negotiations. Probably because of that, nobody's come out and actually said that, hey, you know, the org owners like, hey, you know, this is good for us, guys. Like, chill, like this is great. It's a lot of like, okay, you know, we need to think this through. Now, there are certain big personalities. Bayano held this thing. Eric Cat and Leon Butcher, some of the big journalists in the region, they came out and talked about it as well. They were trying to explain to the Brazilians the positive side of this for Brazil, not just for global esports as a whole, because hey, we already know global esports benefits Brazil's sacrifice. That's the narrative that's going through Brazil, which they're trying to change right now to say, hey, there are some benefits to Brazil as well.
Could you talk about like some of the, because I only caught like a little bit of that stream, and even then it was like translated bits. I didn't understand. Like I was like, okay, so like what is the? I mean, we've talked about a little bit the positive sides for Brazil, like the competitiveness, so on and so forth, sustainability, right? I mean, we're going on what, year 10? Like there's like I mean, for Brazil, it's like year 5 for franchising, right? Or year 4. I think it was 2020. Yeah, 2021. Is it for them, like, is some of the positives like, hey, we'll be able to maintain this model? Like, this is something that you can think about 20 years from now. Like, I think a lot of people are viewing this change as like something that is very pivotal and will be talked about 10 years from now when League Esports is still alive, if it's still alive.
Sure, like the same way we talk about franchising now, right? Like this is probably going to be like another landmark, watershed moment for League Esports if it survives into the future. Now, the problem is, I'm going to be upfront, the benefits are not that significant to Brazil compared to other regions. So as you kind of mentioned, it should be more competitive, right? Like less teams coming through, the fact that we get to go against North America, that we've got guaranteed slots at international events, at least at MSI.
You have a guaranteed world slot. You have a guaranteed world slot. It's not playing anymore.
That reaction, Shibby. That's like the North American LCS reaction. That's true. That's hilarious right now. Like North America loves the international events, right? Like to them, that's a measure of success. Brazil's just like, whatever, bro. We'll win it if we win it. If we don't, we don't care.
But I think it's so cool that you could directly seed it. Like you're gonna be in Group A, B. Motherfucking Loud is gonna be with Genji or some shit. Like that's crazy. That's crazy. Yep. And there's potential for you. I think the more hilarious outcome is if Loud or like CBLOL gets to a point where like it's 2 world spots for CBLOL because they win the 3rd one that they're gonna fight over. That is wild, right? I think there is like in a long enough timeline, assuming these changes go through and are supported in the way that, you know, Mark Z and Riot has talked about. Shit, man, we might get like 2 CBLOL teams at Worlds, and I think that's amazing. I mean, like
people keep talking long term, but look at the way FlyQuest performed last year or last split. There's a world they drop random games against the Brazilian like 2nd seed or something or 1st seed, and next thing you know, wait, what the hell? Brazil beat NA? Like I could see it happening. Agree.
Anyways, go on to the. I mean, I know that reaction, like Worlds guaranteed world spot, is insane, but like it seems like you said, people don't give a fuck.
Basically, no, they don't prioritize that, right? Like again, if they want the spot, they want to win the spot. They don't really want to. People have pointed this out. Like, if you show up at Worlds and you're like the weakest region by a long shot because of a guaranteed seed, and you just get trashed by everybody, nobody's going to be happy about that, right? So, like for Brazil too, like they'd rather be competitive. At least when they go there, if they get wiped by everybody else, they can say, we got wiped by everybody else, but we wiped somebody to get here. Like you can complain about us all you want. We beat NA 2nd seed, you know, like that's, or 3rd seed, you know, that would be like the mindset that Brazil would want to have. Beyond that, of course, the sustainability of the franchises, right? Because the franchises, some of them, well, a lot of them are loss making, right? For CBLOL. So that's kind of the benefits mostly that we're kind of talking about. And also the fact that, and Ellis and I Will Dominate have talked about this. Ironically, I think the way they said it probably wasn't the best, which is why like Ellis is getting crucified by the Brazilians who loved him. Brazilians love to love, they love to hate. You know, it can kind of go both ways. But you keep League alive as a whole. Because even if Brazil does incredibly well, if the rest of the world dies, League as an esport as a whole will die. And it
Riot has no incentive. Riot has no incentive. Yeah. If LCS falls, I think they talked about it like the first domino, right? Which is very true. And it's happened in other esports. LS has actually lived through the StarCraft.
Yes.
Like, I mean, we're old enough to know the Stark. Like we've lived through it, but he's actually lived through the esports side of it, where we were observers, right? I mean, you could argue Overwatch to some extent is going through that right now, right? Like,
arguably it's already happened to Overwatch in a way. It's so small now. It's shrunk. It's half dead, right? And that's one of the things too. And by the way, that narrative right there, LCS being the first domino to fall, is one of the major reasons, why CBLOL is so upset with the LCS and keeps
because it feels like you're bailing him out. Yeah. CBLOL feels like they're bailing him out.
people like don't see the direct connection. They're like, Brazil is being irrational. No. Brazil has been fed the narrative by a lot of people, Riot included, that we have to do this for the LCS, and Brazil's going like, the hell we do. So yeah, the problem is the benefits really aren't that immediate to CBLOL, but you do need it. It's necessary for league as an esport. It's not like a sport. It's not like football or soccer. Sorry, like where all you need is a ball, a field, goals, right? Like there's no provider for football fields that you have to work with. Whereas for League of Legends, if Riot goes down, League of Legends goes down. Summoner's Rift will not exist independently. Brazil doesn't have their own Summoner's Rift they can play on. Like that's not how this works. So because of that, like those are the sort of benefits that Brazil has to look at. It's more than just them now. It's more than just LCS. It's more than individual regions. We're now looking at a global issue. Think global warming, right? Like your place might be fine, but if somebody's pumping out the exhaust somewhere else, sooner or later you're about to get screwed too.
Well, yeah, almost LCS is kind of like the polar ice caps melting in a way, right?
Yeah.
Almost,
Yep.
right? Yeah, I think there's a lot to take in with the changes and kind of what's been happening, and I think we've dove into a lot of the minutia when it comes to like CBLOL sentiment, what the history is, and stuff like that. It's interesting that you said it's like your heart says no, but your mind says yes, and I think that's it's hard to not have empathy for the CBLOL region. It's hard not to like look at it and be like, yeah, unfortunately, like 40% of your region is getting gutted, and I have nothing but my empathy for that. Like that fucking sucks. I cannot imagine. I mean, I can't imagine like being a fan of North American LCS and like just slowly watching the numbers go down, the fan excitement go down, right? Like I remember it was super big when I was like in college, right? We were staying up late at night watching Worlds, watching like C9 try to like sneak out a game. They're making semis, that kind of stuff. And it is a little bit jarring that it's gotten to this point. But I think, it's rough. I feel for CBLOL simply because also I was a fan. I am a fan of CBLOL. Like I love those guys. I love those.
You used to be part of our unofficial broadcast too.
Yeah, I was a part of the unofficial broadcast. That's why like you can see me like I'll have ties. I'll talk to Dia. I'll talk to 4x4. I'm friends with all the English broadcasting people, and it sucks because that region, win or lose, they were super passionate. I had fans message me after casts, right? And it was like really cool. I was like, oh, I've never had that before. Like, it sucks because at best, your hope is that a lot of the fans that get lost from those 4 other teams just watch the rest of CBLOL, and some of them majority might. So that
the majority won't. That's the other issue. Like Brazil. So this is a thing in Brazil, not just with esports, but sports as a whole. Like a lot of Brazilians follow the team, not the game. If their team leaves, they leave the game as well. So back when franchising happened, K-Stars didn't make the cut. Right? I think it was a funding. They didn't have the funding or something. Yeah. So they didn't make the cut. The K-Stars fans left. They did not switch teams. You didn't see K-Stars fans going to INTZ. You didn't see them going to Cruzeiro, Choose Miners. They just flat out left the scene. So there was a dip in viewership when that happened. And K-Stars was big at that time. And it's not like they did a merger like Vorax or whatever, or Prodigy, And when K-Stars came back in, a lot of those fans came out of the woodwork as well. A lot of Coach CL fans, like those people supporting Coach CL on the whole sort of 5-year program, a lot of them were not supporting any teams prior to K-Stars coming back in. And now that K-Stars is back, they will blindly follow their teams. So when you cut those 40 teams, or those 40% of the teams in CBLOL, you're probably going to get a big viewership hit as well. Those viewers will leave until their team comes back in, if their teams ever come back in.
So the South Conference or CBLOL is just going to get like, it might not be 1-to-1, but they'll get like a 30% viewership drop, right? Potentially.
I wouldn't be surprised, if that ends up happening. Like that's kind of what we're expecting.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. I mean, I know that's how it works for like events and stuff where like if Brazilian teams are playing, once they're gone, the Brazilian fans leave, right? Or like if they host like majors in Brazil, like for CSGO, right? The American players, if they're like, if none of the Brazilian teams are in the top 5 or top 8 top 4 bracket, all that stuff, it gets like really quiet, stuff like that. I think recently Valorant had that same issue where like once Loud got knocked out, the venue was a little quiet or nobody was cheering. That is an insane thing to me that like, maybe it's not insane because I come from American football and like my team, historically, I'm a Raiders fan, unfortunately. They haven't been good for 20 years. I'm still going to support them. If they were to leave, yeah, I think you're right. I probably wouldn't find another team to support in football. Like I might just stop watching football altogether if like the team that I grew up with wasn't there. And in some regard, you could argue like Brazilian fans grew up with these teams, like generational stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is there a silver lining in that regard where like maybe we get more North American viewers on the South Conference and more CBLOL viewers on the North American Conference? Or is it going to be a similar situation where we're only going to see bumps in viewership when the cross-conference play happens?
Most likely just in the cross-conference play, because if Brazilian teams aren't playing, Brazilians aren't particularly motivated to watch. I mean, they will watch. There's already a subset of the Brazilian population or Brazilian fandom who does watch LCS anyways already.
Because like of Baiano, though, right?
Beyond Baiano, but yes, Baiano was a big chunk of why a lot more people started watching it. It also helped that B-Boy went over. He was on Pain last year. He went and he won All-Stars. That helps as well because it's like, hey, look, that guy's basically Brazil. He's not, but the sort of association there helps bring some of the fans over and kind of support them. So unless we start seeing the players cross over more, like LCS picking up Brazilian players, or I don't think Brazil's going to pick up any players for one. But unless we start seeing more crossover, I don't think we're going to get what Riot maybe was hoping for viewership exchange. The other issue is this argument between LCS and CBLOL and the bad blood that's brewing is not going to end well. It's not going to build rivalry. It's going to build hate.
So, yeah, it's not like a friendly rivalry. It's like,
no,
oh, we hate you guys. Like I don't.
You can talk about hate watching, but people only hate watch when there's a chance for them to fail, basically, right? And if you hate the entire league, the only time you're going to hate watch them is when they're playing against like Brazil or like a different region to hate them, basically, right? That's not going to help like regular season sort of viewership numbers bump up as well. Now, so because of that, I'm really hoping that this kind of, and I'm proud of Brazilians, like the guys at the top, like the names I mentioned, like Ericat and Leon Butcher, Baiano. They are trying to explain to the Brazilians this hate is unwarranted. This hate is wrong. LCS isn't actively screwing us over. Like things are happening. It's not the LCS's fault. This is a global issue. Let's not hate our northern neighbors right now. It's not on them. I'm proud of them for doing that because that's how you kind of build things back. And they're trying to look ahead. They're trying to say, okay, where is that silver lining? Like what can we do? Because Baiano pointed out that CBLOL is by the fans for the fans. Like it's the community that built them up. He runs the CBLOL charity tournament in the off season, which is always a huge event. Didn't unfortunately run this off season when some of the North Americans like Dante was supposed to come down and play in that. Some stuff happened, it got canceled, but it got big enough that North America wanted in as well, right? So he's still saying like, hey, CBLOL is always for the fans by the fans. We can recover from this. I don't want to say we can fix it, but we can recover. We can make it CBLOL great again.
yeah.
That sort of idea. But even that's kind of been screwed a little bit. There was an interview with Carlos Antunes, the head of Americas right now, who's originally from Brazil. Mm-hmm. And Brazil is trying to say, okay, we've got tier 2, right? We made tier 1. We can do it again in tier 2. We can get all these orgs down. We lose those 4 organizations. Come to tier 2. We'll support tier 2. They were just told, we don't know what's happening with tier 2 now. We don't know if it's franchise. We don't know how many spots are going to be available. We don't know who's going to get it. So things are looking kind of dark right now, Shavi. The silver lining is very, very, very thin. Now, it's early days yet. And granted, with the whole merger news and the backlash, I think was a little bit unexpected. Riot probably didn't have time to flesh out the full plan. And let's be honest, this announcement was not really an announcement. It was, I can't remember who said this, but it's the announcement of an announcement. I agree with that
it's
idea.
The warning. That's what I called it. It's the warning. Hey.
Yeah.
Hey. Pack it up. It's 5 regions now.
Yep.
Like it or not. Yeah, like it or not, we're doing it. It's the warning. It is the announcement to the announcement, though. I think Mark Z went on and talked about like this is the blueprint. This is the overall plan. We're still fleshing out these edge cases scenarios where things can be abused, like sister teams, promotion, relegation, what's going to happen to like the teams and stuff like that. They're all kind of fleshing that still out. It's probably in Riot's best interest to get information out as soon as possible, but knowing them, they'll drip feed stuff. And then one big announcement will come. It'll be a drip feed into slam another big announcement, right? Like that's usually their play. Albeit they have been a little bit more communicative in the blogs, but one could argue the fact that they put it in articles and blogs kind of makes it, because like realistically, how many esports fans are reading LOL esports blogs and articles? Like if they really wanted to make sure like this announcement was getting out to everyone, they would post it on the channels, right? They would post it on the YouTube.
They just do like a video, right? Like they did with Mark all the time for a major announcement. That's why you're doing video, Shibby, and you're not writing articles either. You're a very well man, but this is how you get news out there. And you know, I'm still hoping that, well, I'm sure Riot will flesh this out. I think it's good that we're having this sort of discourse now about the sort of the tier 2 system and bring up all these potential issues for them. And depending on how it pans out, you know what, maybe things won't be as bad for CBLOL as they expect. Maybe things won't be as bad for all the regions, as you know, because again, the Apex a whole different issue as well. They got even worse off than us in a way. LA got shafted even harder as well. So I'm still choosing to be optimistic about all of this and say that, okay, right now, silver lining, not quite there, but that's because, you know, they're drawing it right now. It'll come. We just need to hold out till then.
Well, we're hitting the 1 hour mark. I didn't think we'd be able to talk so long about this, but there was, like you said, so much for history. We didn't even really go into the history of CBLOL and stuff like that. I didn't really want to do that because I think there is so much there, and you could realistically make a whole nother hour to that 3 hour long video regarding of like the beginnings of CBLOL, how they grew it organically, stuff like that. But I think this is a big issue, and I'm glad I got to get you on. You know, like when I think subject matter expert, you're one of them for CBLOL, at least on the English speaking side, and also just you understand the storylines. You're very empathetic to the Brazilian cause and stuff like that, and you've been somebody that I've known at least for the last 3 years that is just like very knowledgeable on the Brazilian scene, and you're very impartial at times, which is nice, right? Like you can see both sides, which is very good. Obviously, shout out like your plug. I know you stream CBLOL Academy. You're like one of two people. You and 4x4 are the only ones that you know, stream Academy. So if there is some sort of Academy system that's happening, you know, that's both NACL and CBLOL Academy, and you need a caster, I would recommend this guy wholeheartedly. I don't think anybody knows more about Academy than him. I legitimately don't. But plug your YouTube channel, your stream. Like, what do you do? When are you live? All that stuff. I'm going to give you the moment.
Okay, so I co-stream the CBLOL Academy, as you mentioned, Shibby. So that's on my channel, twitch.tv/RandomMinionCaster. Please drop by. It's more of a chill co-stream. It's not like full-on casting. You can find updates as well when I'm streaming or what I'm doing on the artist formerly known as Twitter, x.com/randommcaster. And as well, check us out on CBLOL English, CBLOL_English on Twitch and on YouTube. Do support us as well. Right now, the CBLOL English is a co-stream. We are no longer directly funded or supported by Riot, unfortunately. So our continued existence literally depends on the support of people right now, because we are going to not have funds after this year. Riot Brazil has done a great job, you know, trying to support us how they can, but monetary is not one of them after this year. So please do check out our content, like it, you know, subscribe, just help out where we can. We appreciate all of it. So yeah, and thanks, Chevy, for having me on as well. Always love talking CBLOL. I won't claim to be an expert because I don't speak Portuguese. I try my best, but CBLOL, you know, has been such a wonderful, welcoming region. They are not xenophobic whatsoever. Yes, I know they're going after North America right now. That's not the default state. I'm from North America, and they welcome me greatly. And you know, I hope that, you know, this America's sort of merger, this North-South conference thing, can go a friendly way, and you know that ultimately ends up being a good thing, and that the North Americans are welcomed as much as I have been so far.
Could not agree more. The Brazilian fan base, some of the most passionate, if not the most passionate I've ever seen. Just know all the information will be listed below in the description box. The stream, the CBLOL English stream, the videos they do. They have a podcast. They pump out a lot of content, and I would think it'd be such a sad thing to see a broadcast that I was once a part of and that I hold very dearly in my heart, with a lot of friends on that broadcast, would go. I think that would just be crazy, because the amount of service and the amount work that they put in. It is absolutely insane. So thank you so much, RMC. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
and yeah, thanks everybody for watching. Any comments down below? I know the Brazilian fans are going to eat this up because I remember our region rundown I did with you for last year's MSI was one of my most successful videos. So I know I've got CBLOL fans watching this video and subscribing. So please comment. Let me hear your takes. I try to do my best to respond and everything like that. And yeah, I'll show RMC some once we get it. It'll be really fun. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the video. I'm hoping you guys enjoyed the content. If you did, leave a like, comment, do all that jazz. I genuinely try to respond to every single comment I see because it's always interesting to see the other opinions of people that care about League of Legends esports as much as I do. Obviously, the best way to support me is to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications on my latest uploads. If you want to see more of me and my content, I stream on Twitch 5 days a week. The link will be in the description box below. If you are into short form content, I'm also on TikTok. We talk about LPL, LCK, LEC, all the stuff over there. We talk about roster moves. So if your jam is short form content, head over to TikTok, hit the follow button there. I'm also on Twitter. So all of that stuff will be in the description box below. But other than that, thanks for watching the video and I hope to see you soon.